Do I have to go through another test?
Yes, there cannot be any exceptions.
Then let's not waste any time.
What a great game. Stellar Blade is phenomenal. It's one of the best Souls-like games out there. It's even better than Lies of P. And as someone who is quite big on criticizing these types of games, I don't say that lightly. Today we're going to once again look at the best and worst things about the game, but at the current time, Stellar Blade is not so much famous for being one of the best Souls-like games out there, more so the ridiculous controversy that it's so stupid it's barely even worth discussing. It can't be ignored completely, but the fact that Sony censored this game for being too violent and too sexual is so stupid, I can't take it seriously, and you shouldn't either. Yeah, it may have resulted in the game getting way more attention than it probably would have gotten, but anybody can see this is not a legit thing. It has been done intentionally by Sony to destroy the reputation of this game. If Eve had been gay, ugly, or outright overweight, it would have been perfectly okay, but an attractive woman with a skin-tight outfit is out of the question and must be censored. The unpleasant Last of Us Part 2 sex scene, Baldur's Gate 3 allowing bestiality, all okay, and if Eve was muscular to the extent of being ugly, that'd be okay too, but she's not, so it's inappropriate. This went beyond stupidity a long time ago, and at some point you just have to laugh at it. If you actually agree, there's something truly wrong with you. That's as complicated as that gets. So before we get to the reasons why Stellar Blade is a fantastic game, and the reasons why it's not perfect, I do want to address the IGN review. Normally I would make a video on this because they only gave it a 7, and that's fucked up. But the fact is, most of the review is actually valid. Stellar Blade does not have an engaging narrative, in my opinion. And Eve isn't really that fascinating. That may upset somebody, but I have to agree with IGN on that. For the most part, you can watch this review and not be told a number of lies, unlike the Lies of P review. That was pretty awful. So discussing that would be pointless, but still, giving it a 7 is fucking stupid. It's astounding that a game like this could get a 7 from a quote-unquote reputable gaming review site, but that's the way things are now. I'm not going to include those flaws here because I don't think a game like this needs an amazing story. If it has one, that's great, but I'm not going to complain about that. So here are all the things I love about Stellar Blade, and a few flaws that are somewhat valid.
The current situation in Zion is desperate, but I believe you'll be able to save us.
Customization. If we could just look past the censorship, which we can because it's insane, we could truly appreciate the customization at our disposal. 70 plus nanosuits found throughout the game, all appealing in their own way, and things like earrings, glasses, and multiple hairstyles, it's hard not to get invested in all the unique ways you can customize Eve. You can do the same with Adam and Lily, not to the same extent, but it is nice to have. And as someone who was extremely excited upon seeing the clothing options GTA San Andreas gave us, as well as being equally frustrated that nobody took advantage of that, just buying something green and calling it a day, I was overjoyed to see the game was not remotely lacking as far as customization goes. Given the game's supposed main selling point was sex appeal, that's not surprising. But regardless of just how stupid the situation is, you can't look past this, it's damn impressive. It's a shame a lot of us may never get to see the outfits the way they were intended, but at least we'll always have that wonderful scene in The Last of Us Part 2. Watch it at least twice a day.
I don't know. Don't ask me.
Crafting the nanosuits. Unfortunately, a caveat that doesn't need to exist, but for some reason they're kind of limited. It's the basic, you need certain materials to make the new outfits, and normally that'd be okay, but the problem is the outfits aren't exactly free to begin with. Most of them have to be found, a lot of which in absurd locations, and the way I see it, finding these should be enough, especially if you consider it's purely cosmetic.
That's
totally selfish.
On top of that, a lot of these need to be bought, and still it's the same thing. You're expected to have X resources, and in the end, you probably won't get them all unlocked. I don't know why they'd put so much effort into this and then limit how many you can have. Even if you only care about the ones you like, even deciding is problematic, as rotating the camera on locked suits isn't even an option. Again, why? To some people, that's the best part. Obviously not a huge deal, but definitely on the pointless side of things.
That is irrelevant. What is relevant is how my fantabulous hypothesis could hold the solution to my problems.
Enemy variety. It's a simple idea, really. You play the game, you fight some enemies, move to a new area, fight some new enemies. The new enemies may even have different movesets, meaning you have to think and do something different. In a perfect world, that'd be a given, but a lot of the time, these games can get very repetitive. To avoid conflict, I won't name which games I'm thinking of, but Stellar Blade simply doesn't have that problem. No enemies act completely the same, they all require you to do something different. Some of them do appear constantly throughout the game, and it is a bit annoying, but nothing that I would consider a flaw. Yeah, the game isn't all that long, but still there is a lot to see, and I could always count on the combat offering something new. We'll talk more about this later, obvious things that shouldn't be an issue to begin with, but variety is something I like about this game.
That's blasphemy! Sacrilege!
Right. Sorry.
Shooting sections. This may be a bit controversial, I don't know what the general opinion is on this, but I don't like these that much. The sections that require you to exclusively shoot for a reasonable amount of time aren't that fun in my opinion. They're not that difficult aside from a few standout moments, they're overall just repetitive, and the bosses that conclude them are the same thing, and not difficult and repetitive. There are other elements of gameplay thrown in, but they're not exactly good either. Talk more about those a bit later. But the overall idea just doesn't work for me. Maybe some people like it. The gun is definitely a good addition to the game, but not when you have to use it for sections that go on too long. Maybe if the enemies required something more unique to kill them, opposed to just going down real easy. And since you have to only use the gun, the game constantly gives you more ammo, eliminating any type of difficulty. If the rest of the game did this too, a lot of things would be way too easy, so that's kind of the issue right there. Maybe a good idea on paper, but it needed some work.
I think I have a really great idea.
Fair combat. The most important thing about any game, especially the Souls-like game, is fair, well-designed combat, and I can't believe how good it is here. Not only is it well-designed with a number of unique ways to parry and dodge, depending on the color of the enemy's attack, but nothing ever really feels cheap. It's very uncommon for the enemies to gang up on you, though it is possible in the open areas, but it's easy to avoid. The bosses are almost all real good, aside from one. We'll get to that. And it's just a fun, fluent system that you get better at as you go. One caveat to this is the game is simply not that hard, at least until the end. A lot of stuff can easily be beat by simply using all the abilities at your disposal, and to be completely honest, I don't really see this as a Souls-like game. Don't get me wrong, it's real good, and I've kind of come to hate the term Souls-like, but aside from making you reset at the game's token resting place, a lot of common elements you see in Souls-like games aren't present here. Most notably, if you die, you don't lose anything if you can't reobtain it. That's like a given in these games. This does lead to another issue that again I will get to, but it's no reason to not love this game. The combat is almost perfect, very few flaws to be had, very few sections I don't like. It's amazing how good this game is, and it's so unfortunate that Sony has tried so hard to ruin the game's reputation.
Oof, I guess that really got under your skin. Now.
The platforming. Yeah, you knew this was coming. Why they put platforming in, I don't know. If it was good, that'd be one thing, but unfortunately it's not. These are not fun sections at all. The jumping is way too sensitive, and if you happen to fall, which you will a lot, you don't die, you just lose health. It's kind of like they knew it was no good. This is something that commonly appears in the shooting sections, is how they broke up that gameplay, so well done. But it's not exclusive to that, and whenever it appears, I just want it to be over. I kind of also wanted to include the turret sections. The gameplay for that does feel similar, as it involves moving a precise way, but there's really not that many of those in the game to justify that, and if you haven't noticed yet, these aren't really big flaws. The real flaws of this game come down to the story and whatnot. That's why I don't mention them here, it's obvious. But that's not what I look for in these games, and it's not a reason to give it a fucking 7. Platforming is definitely a stupid addition. If it took up more of the game, that would be problematic. It's an issue, a real stupid idea, and something we can all agree to hate.
This is more than just an upgrade. It's an evolution!
The checkpoints. So a debate that I've commonly had about the original Souls games is how the checkpoints should work. Those games utilize the bonfires, that's how you would reset, along with shortcuts to make it faster, and personally, I think this was very important to the game's overall design. Not in Dark Souls 2, those were fucking trash, and so was that game. Obviously there's gonna be bad checkpoints somewhere, but for all of you who say don't have them at all, just play on PC and use save states, I think you're missing the point. The whole idea behind this franchise is to get better, and even though these games are difficult, they're not really that difficult, they just make you know how to play the game, and if you could simply reset anytime you wanted, with no real consequences for dying, well then, you'll never get better. It's not just about having to reset, the game can still be difficult, but it's the fear of having to repeat stuff and possibly lose your souls that drive you to improve. Some people practice non-stop, they want to be the best no matter what, I understand that, but for others, that's simply not the case. If there wasn't some penalty for death, the franchise would not be what it was, but in the same vein, if something is truly difficult, like an extremely challenging boss, then I don't think the run back is needed. An example would be the Old Hero, the only boss in Demon's Souls that I truly like, ruined due to having, well, the game's worst run back. The franchise till this day still tends to make this mistake, though Elden Ring was a lot better, and whenever a game does it right, I am gonna give it credit. If you haven't guessed by now, it's another thing Stellar Blade does not mess up. At no point did it take issue with any of these checkpoints, and for the bosses, the runbacks are almost non-existent. For the most part, they do provide challenge, you have to know how to fight them, so a long run back is definitely not needed. It's really that simple, it's one of the most important things these games have to get right, and Stellar Blade definitely does that.
Enough of this nonsense!
On balance, toward the end, this is probably my only real gripe with the game, but it is a bit odd how it ends with the big boss gauntlet. It's not like one single boss going through a bunch of stages. They're all quite different, but I feel it would have been a bit better if something broke these up. I mean, the last two take place in a whole new area, so anything would have been appreciated, but instead it's just one boss after another, and then the game ends. Also, the unidentified Natiba really sucks. It's the only boss that's terribly designed, an attack so cheap you need the shotgun to stop it, and the ability to instant kill you if you don't shoot a bunch of targets. Luckily, the other bosses are all great, aside from Adam being a free kill. Raven is probably the best in the game, and also maybe the hardest, but that's the other issue with this. Like I said, the game is not really that difficult, aside from most of these bosses. The amount of skill needed to get to them is not equal to their difficulty level, and unfortunately, it does feel out of place. I guess what I'm saying is the game should be a bit harder. I don't really like complaining about this, but it does feel a bit unbalanced. It doesn't make it any less fun, but only after beating these bosses can you truly say you've gotten good. Sadly, you're not going to be prepared for it. It's the one big flaw with this game, aside from story stuff, so it has to be said.
I fully respect your decision, Eve, even if it is a bittersweet one.
New Game Plus. I've never been into New Game Plus myself, and now that changes. Yes, Stellar Blade has made this endeavor more than worthwhile by giving us a New Game Plus that's more than simply increasing the difficulty and giving you your old stuff. You also have alternate new outfits, a number of new skills to buy, and even though you don't need New Game Plus for this, an additional hard difficulty. This is something you just don't really see these days. There are things about it I don't like having to already have the outfits to get the new designs, but given they didn't have to do this, it was by no means expected, you have to commend this. It gives the game purpose after the first playthrough, aside from play the game again to get all the items, and while I'm somebody who doesn't need replay value to replay it, if the game is good, that's enough, it doesn't hurt to be given a proper reason. Again, I never cared about this kind of thing, never really found New Game Plus that fun, but with Stellar Blade, they've again completely changed the game. Literally. If there wasn't already enough reason, pick this game up.
So...
The ponytail. The most appalling thing this game did with all the customization options they have, including a fucking hair salon, the option to change the ponytail length is hidden in the gameplay settings, and it made me sick. So there you have it, 5 things I absolutely love about Stellar Blade, and 5 that aren't that great. Let me know what you guys thought down below, hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and consider subscribing, it helps me a great deal. I'm the Game Analyst, and don't forget, if you're planning on being a Sony employee retard someday, pressed, don't move. That's a myth. Oh, what? You're actually here? That's fucking amazing. I guess you may as well check out the main channel, in which I discuss movies, TV series, and the offensive topics that lie within. If you're into that, then press the link in the description. It's right there.